Okay, we're live on a Wednesday night. No, it's not Wednesday. It's a Thursday night for the Panther-Lair Show. It's 8:30 p.m. I hope you can hear me. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com for a live Panther-Lair Show. We're back after changing the schedule a little bit this week. Didn't do the show last night. Moved it to tonight just for a little 1 week change. But, we'll do that every now and then. It's the summertime. Sometimes schedules change and things come up. But we're glad you could tune in tonight and join the live show. You know the deal. Well, we always talk about Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are online at Panther-Lair.com talking about all things Pitt sports. I mean, it's literally all day, every day. People are posting on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So if you're a Pitt fan, you want to hang out with other Pitt fans, go check out the boards, Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, the YouTube page here. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm going to say that a bunch of times. Click subscribe so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content that we have here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have the morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. Just get your day started with a little bit of Pitt conversation, your shower, your morning shower, your morning shave, and your morning Pitt. That's a good way to get the day started. And then, of course, we have our live show that we do every week, usually Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m., but this week it's Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Had to change the schedule around. Of course, you see the chat screen there on the right-hand side of your screen. You want to join the conversation here. We'll bring in our friend Jim Hammett in a second to get the conversation started here. But if you want to post your comments and questions, you can do so in that chat screen right next to us. And you want to make sure that I know we a lot of times get a lot of comments, a lot of questions, and sometimes we don't get to everything that everybody says. If you want to make sure your comment gets read or your question gets answered, you can always be a super chatter down at the bottom of the chat screen there. You see a little dollar sign. You can click that, kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We thank you for that, supporting the show and supporting what we do here. And we'll definitely get to your comment or your question if you are a super chatter. Now, the superest chatter of all, he's our friend. He's Jim Hammett, and there he is. Jim, can you hear me, and can I hear you?
I can hear you.
All right, and there you are. I can hear you, too. Look at that. Success already. We're off to a great start. Jim, we're welcoming you back, of course, after you bailed on us last week to go off to New Jersey. How was your vacation? How was Stone Harbor?
It was a good time. The weather was not the greatest, so kind of had to not a lot of beach time, but figured it out anyway and had a good time.
Raining or just cold?
Raining.
Okay. And then you come back here and it's smoke covered.
Yeah.
So you're in Johnstown. It's been terrible here in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's hazy everywhere. I mean, you can see the pictures online. People are tweeting of not being able to see downtown. How bad is it in Johnstown? Are you guys getting it as well?
Yeah, it's the same thing, because I was in Pittsburgh last night and I was kind of amazed at how bad Pittsburgh was, and it's kind of like that here today. So
it's I feel like it was a couple of weeks ago that this was all supposed to happen. There's a big talk. Like I remember right when my kids got out of school in the first week of June, it was going to be these air quality alert days. I didn't realize it was going to show up again 2 weeks later. I don't know. This sort of hit me out of nowhere, kind of out of the blue. Are you staying indoors, or are you going outside doing a lot of strenuous activity?
Well, I do have to do some yard work, but maybe we'll put it off until the smoke clears.
It's a good reason to skip it. Well, we got a lot to talk about, Jim. A lot of things happened while you were gone, but most importantly, I mean, I should bring this up first. I'm not sure if you caught some of this important connections that we were drawing here. Josh Newark says that we moved the show to Thursday because I was visiting, I don't know if it's Chowan College. I think it might actually be a university, but it's in North Carolina. Did you hear about some of the things I uncovered regarding the Pitt transfer running backs, Chowan College, Chowan University, and North Carolina A&T? Are you aware of any of this?
No, but what happened when I was gone?
Oh, this is something. So Jordan Bailey, right? You remember Jordan Bailey, yes. Running back last year, didn't qualify, decommitted, recommitted, signed, didn't qualify. So when he didn't qualify, he ended up going to this Chowan University or Chowan College or whatever it is in North Carolina. It's a D2 school. He went there, and it's Chowan University, carried the ball 38 times, scored 3 touchdowns, 5 yards per carry, whatever. Apparently he's transferring again. I don't know if he's found a destination. But Chowan University, when you Google Chowan University, because who knows what the heck Chowan University is, one of the things that shows up on their Google search results page is their notable alumni, which includes none other than Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attacks. Apparently, this guy in 1983 went to Chowan University, right? That's weird. That's a random connection, right? Strange, but it's, you're on the internet. You come across weird things. It gets weirder, though, because KSM did not finish his undergrad work at Chowan University. He transferred to North Carolina A&T, where Michael Salahuddin also transferred. So there's some connection between Pitt transfer running backs and the architect of the 9/11 attacks. And I haven't figured it out yet, and I probably shouldn't go too far down this rabbit hole because all of a sudden my screen will go black and I'll be out of here, black vans outside my house and all that kind of thing. I don't want to be, I don't want to have a rendition situation. But I'm just saying there's a weird connection there. And
you kind of sound like Charlie Kelly in the Always Sunny whenever he's pointing to everything and has like everything mapped out.
I was thinking more of, I always forget who's the NBA guy who is like, now why would that be? Now why would that happen? And why would you have two former Pitt running backs going to the same schools that KSM went to? Anyway, it is funny when you Google Chowan University and they bring up like notable alumni, and there's there's all these pictures of people doing successful things, athletes, titans of industry and whatnot. And then there's like the Guantanamo Bay mugshot of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and right there, it's like the first one that shows up. So that's Josh's joke that I was visiting Chowan University. That I'll say this: on the morning pit yesterday, I kind of broke down the running back room and went over the history of the running backs, and it got weird because I started going down that path of Chowan University and North Carolina A&T. Let's talk about the running backs actually, because you've written a lot about the running backs this week, and I wanted to talk to you about this anyway, just kind of running back stuff in general. But the one that stood out to me was today you ranked the top 5 running backs in the Narduzzi era. And in case anybody didn't read this on Panther-Lair.com, it's running back week here, right? We did quarterbacks last week. We're previewing the running back room now. And last Thursday, you did the top quarterbacks in the Narduzzi era. This week, you did the top running backs in the Narduzzi era. Counting them down, this is your ranking. Number 5, Vincent Davis. Number 4, Darren Hall. Number 3, Izzy Abanikanda. Number 2, Quadri Olson. Number 1, James Conner. I don't think you'll get any argument about number 1. I don't know if anybody has a strong feeling about 4 or 5, but I'm curious what led you to put Quadri Olson over Darren Hall. Or not over Darren Hall, over Izzy Abanikanda. Olson at 2 and Abanikanda at 3. Is it the fact that Olson had 2,000-yard seasons, or what motivated that ranking?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it was for me, because there's 6 running backs in Pitt history to have 2 1,000-yard seasons, and Quadri Olson's probably the most unlikely of the bunch, but he did do it. So, I mean, he had such a weird career because he really came out of nowhere. I mean, because James Conner got hurt in the first quarter of the first game in 2015. And I think Olson rushed for 200 yards against Youngstown State, went on to have a 1,000-yard season. Then the next year, he didn't play much because James Conner came back. Then the next year, he was kind of splitting time with Darren Hall, which was the same thing as the senior year, but he was just better as a senior. So, I mean, he really had like the full on, and someone kind of asked that question when I posted the article. In the day of, in this day and age of the transfer portal, would Quadri Olson have stuck around all 4 years at Pitt? After what happened when James Conner came back and he kind of got pushed to the side.
I think Quadri Olson was a great teammate. I think he was a great team player. I mean, you never really got a sense that he was moping or griping, because even without the transfer portal, he still could have left in 2016. He still could have left in 2017. Although 17 wouldn't make sense because Conner was gone. So it would make sense for him to come back. I think he was a great team guy. He was willing to split the carries with Hall in 17 and 18. He was willing to play behind Conner in 16. I just think he was kind of, and it's a funny thing to say for a guy who had particularly his 2018 season and that long run against Virginia Tech, but he was just kind of, I hate to say an average back because it seems disrespectful to a guy who, like you said, had 2 1,000-yard seasons, but even that 2015 season, I mean, so he ran for 1,100 yards. He had 200 yards against Youngstown State. And he had 4 other 100-yard games, and plus he had a 49-yard game against Virginia, a 17-yard game at Iowa. He had a 37-yard game against Miami, 32 against Notre Dame, 54 against North Carolina. He was just, again, I don't want to talk down on it, but it was sort of the most pedestrian 1,000-yard season that you could have. I mean, it wasn't really all that impressive. And I guess, the thing with Izzy is, last year he was Izzy's year last year was better than either of Olison's 1,000-yard seasons. You know, I think. You know, he finished with 28 career rushing touchdowns. Olison had 29. Olison was here 5 years. Izzy was here 3. Is it just purely on the stats? I mean, or do you think Olison was a better player? Or do we have to give extra credence to the stats if we're going to rank them like this?
I mean, I think I kind of, as I did my rankings, I did it by overall career, because I think Izzy Abanikanda is a better running back. But, I mean, the whole career goes with him. So, I mean, he didn't really play much as a freshman. They talked about how he couldn't get on the field because he didn't know the plays. But as a sophomore, he, you know, they had one of the best passing attacks in school history, so he didn't get the ball a lot. So, I mean, obviously he was great this past season, one of the best seasons a Pitt running back has ever had. So, I mean, I think just the totality of it. And I also with Olison, I mean, yeah, his 2018 season wasn't as good as Izzy's season in 2022, but again, he had a 1,000-yard back, you know, sharing the backfield with him. So, I mean, I think there's probably something to be said. If Darren Hall wasn't there, Olison's season might have been, you know, even better.
And if George Aston wasn't there, it might have been worse. Because Aston, like, it's so funny. Every time I watch that clip of that long run against Virginia Tech, I mean, Olison obviously, you know, I'm surprised that guy from Virginia Tech didn't quit football after Quadri Olison pushed him to the ground like that. But George Aston just kills a man. I think the guy that George Aston blocks at the beginning of that run probably did quit football if he was even able to walk out of Heinz Field. I mean, George Aston just destroys the guy and completely opens the path. And, you know, I've heard it suggested that Pitt doesn't have the success running the ball they had that year without George Aston. They still would have run it well, but he was such a big part. You know, I think the person I was talking to even went so far as to say, like, they don't win the Coastal without George Aston, because he was that integral to what they did and how they did it. We could go down a long path of talking. I was just reminiscing.
Let's go down a fullback rabbit hole for a second. Maybe not so much of the Narduzzi era, but who are the best, like, modern Pitt fullbacks? I mean, you have Aston.
I mean, you have to. Can you name 5?
Henry Hydowski, Conridge Collins.
Right.
Okay.
Daniel Carter.
Daniel Carter.
I'll give you Daniel Carter. That's 4. Any others who were scholarship players? Even in the Dave Wanstead era, like, even Wani's, like, even Wani's I formation. I mean, like, he had Henry Hydowski for most of that time. There was somebody that first year, like Tim Murphy or somebody like that, like 05, 06 was there, but Conrad was there as well.
Did Paul Christ have a fullback?
Did George Aston move to fullback before Paul Christ left?
I'm not really sure. I'm trying to think of those teams with, like, like, who was walking for, like, James Conner and Isaac, but, like, I don't remember. I don't know if they used a fullback or not.
Let me. I'm going to look up the stats from 2000, because if they did, I'm sure he got like 4 carries or something. Let me look at the stats from 2000. What do we want to say? 14. Let's look at the 2014 Pitt stats. Find out who the fullback would have been. Stats. Rushing leaders. Let's see. No, there was no. I mean, like, the rushing leaders were Connor Voitik, Chris James, Isaac Bennett, Rashid Ibrahim, Tyler Boyd. So there was no fullback who carried the ball. Jamar Parrish, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Jamar Parrish caught 4 passes, so maybe he would have been a guy. That's probably the closest they would have had. What year was that? What did I just say? 14?
14.
Yeah, so that would have probably been the closest, like a Jamar. You know, Paul, I don't know if Paul used that I formation as much. It seems like something he would do, but I don't know if that was his bread and butter quite as much as it was, like, when, you know, Wanstead was here. Looking at 2013 real quick. Yeah, Jamar, again, had 4 carries in 2013, so he played a decent amount. So I guess it would have been him. I mean, there's not really anybody else. 2013, just kind of scrolling down. Artie Rowell caught a pass in 2013.
Wow.
That was similar to Marcus Minor's reception last year, if you recall. Sort of a tipped in the air, catch it. I think somebody had one off of Bill Stahl as well back in 2009. I think might have been John Malecki or somebody caught a pass that was, or maybe actually Stahl caught a pass from himself. It was a pass that, like, he threw and was tipped in the air, and he caught it in 2009. So, but anyway, yeah, your ranking of fullbacks. I mean, George Aston's number 1. Just after that, Henry. I mean,
I would say Hynoski, yeah.
Yeah. Conrad Collins, who committed to Pitt because they promised him he would be a tailback. And then as soon as he got on campus, they were like, no, yeah, just kidding.
Yeah, funny how that works.
Psych. I know Ohio State was recruiting you to be a fullback and you came here to be a tailback, but yeah, we're gonna have you do that. But anyway, yeah, I was trying to think if I had any other issues with your top 5 running backs. I mean, really, it was just Izzy and Quadri. I mean, I don't really know who else you would put in there for as much as they've run the ball. You pretty much listed all 5 guys who did anything of note over the last 8 years.
I think AJ Davis led the team in rushing one of those seasons, but it was like 600 yards. And I mean, I think Vincent was a better player.
Yeah. AJ Davis had like one game at Syracuse where he rushed for 100 yards. And I was like, maybe he could be a lead back, but that never. Yeah, I guess so. He was around. Todd Sibley was around. Michael Salahuddin averaged a handful of yards. So, and then Rodney Hammett, I guess, would just be outside, somewhere in that 6 to 10 range because somebody has to be. Rodney Hammett this year, over under 10.5 games played.
I'm going to say over. I mean, over? I don't really think he has, prolonged nagging injuries. I think he just got his ankle rolled in a freak play against West Virginia. I mean, I think as a freshman, he played every game.
Well, I think it's less about how much you think he's capable of and more about if he's the lead back and he's carrying the ball, whatever, 200 times or something, or 250 times, just the natural wear and tear that comes from being a running back and being a lead running back. You think of eventually, inevitably there's going to be some time that gets mixed. I mean, Izzy missed games? You know what I mean? Like I guess other than Olsen and Hall in 2018, I mean, those guys pretty much played all year. I guess Vincent Davis was pretty durable, come to think of it. I don't really remember him missing too much time with an injury. Maybe that Delaware game in 19, I think the Todd Sibley and Nick Patty show. But I guess what I'm getting to, though, is if Hammond does miss time, who do you think is the guy who steps up there? Who's that next guy in line?
Yeah, and since, I've been writing about running backs all week, and I've kind of had trouble thinking about their depth, and I'm a little concerned about it. I mean, I think, Derek Davis might be able to come in and do something. I mean, Sibo Flemister, you kind of know what you have, but, I don't know how much the freshmen are going to play. And, talking about running backs turn into fullbacks, that's kind of Daniel Carter right now. So, I mean, yeah, you're talking about Rodney Hammett as your number one, and, Sibo and, Derek Davis kind of fighting for carries after that. So they're in a good spot if Rodney Hammond stays healthy. If he gets hurt, then I wonder what's going to happen.
I thought it was interesting. I kind of reading through your stuff, and then I started looking at Sibo and how he finished the season last year. He had the big game at Miami. He had 7 for 89 and a touchdown in the final 4 games. So the final 4 regular season games, the month of November, he had 29 carries for 176 and 2 touchdowns, which was 6.1 yards per carry over the course of those 4 games, which is pretty impressive. I mean, that's a strong performance. I think there's more they can get out of him. He carried the ball 1 time against West Virginia and fumbled, and he had 10 carries over the next 7 games. So he really he disappeared. But when he reappeared in those final 4, he was really effective. I think he was a pretty good player, and I think he might be sort of a sneaky sleeper out there who, there might be something they can get out of him. You know what I mean? If Rodney Hammond has to miss time, or just if they want to split carries, I think he's got a chance to actually make some plays, and he might be the closest thing they have to a home run threat. I don't think he's got Izzy Abanikanda speed, but he might be the closest thing. I guess we're still waiting to see what Derek Davis can do. He had some of that breakaway straight line speed in high school, but I feel like he had some decent runs over that last month. The Miami game in particular, he might just end up surprising and run for 600 yards or something like that, 700 yards, depending on how much they commit to the run. So I feel like he's a guy to maybe keep an eye on, because I don't know, seems like he might, his last year of eligibility, he might have little something to give.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to 2020, he played a fair amount for Notre Dame. I think he had 5 or 6 touchdowns, and talking about that last 4-game stretch, I believe in the Syracuse game, they kind of just gave it was a Sibo series, because Izzy was out that game and Rodney Hammond was the starter. So I think one time in the third quarter, Sibo, and he ran well and he had a touchdown. I think it was unfortunate for him because he didn't play in the bowl game, and that was kind of the launching point for this upcoming season, because that was kind of with 10 guys opted out. It was kind of this year's team playing. So it was unfortunate he wasn't able to be a part of that. But, Rodney Hammond ran well that game, and they probably could have used an extra back. So I think you're right. There might be something there. The long run against Miami, was in the fourth quarter, and Miami probably quit by that point. But
hey, stats count. I mean,
the stats count, and he
ran
made
away.
He made the run. But I do wonder about him, but at the same time, I do think there's something there, and I think there's a lot to be said for experience. I think just being around and playing in big football. I mean, with Notre Dame, I think he played in the college football playoffs. Like, I mean, he's a guy that's been around, so I think he's a guy they can trust, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I do feel like that home run hitter thing is maybe the biggest question mark. I think these guys are good backs, good runners. I think most of them have shown at least a little bit of a flash. But I mean, Izzy's ability to make those explosive plays, those big gains. I mean, we haven't seen it really consistently. I don't think Rodney Hammond's that guy. You know what I mean? I just don't think that's what his game is and what it's going to be based on. He might get one every now and then, but I don't think he's going to get it with the consistency that Izzy had. And for a team that lacked an explosive passing game, I mean, those big runs were crucial. So I guess that's my biggest question is like, where's it going to come from with this group? I mean, is it Sebo? Is it Derek Davis? Or is it just not going to be that kind of rushing attack this year?
I mean, I could see it it might just not be part of the offense this year. I mean, not everyone's Izzy Abanikanda. I mean, some of the things he did last year were pretty crazy. I think he had 4 touchdowns, go over 60 yards. I mean, he was the definition of a home run threat. But like we've talked about Rodney Hammond for a long time now, and there was even times last year or even heading into last season where I could have been talked into someone saying like maybe Rodney Hammond should be getting more carries or equal carries to Izzy. I mean, I kind of bought into that line of thinking. So, and I think the coaches do too. I think they're pretty high on him again. But again, this is the first time he's going to be the full-time guy. I mean, right. He's been part of a committee for the past couple of years, and he missed some time last year. So this is his first shot to really show what he can do. And I mean, I think he's capable. I mean, he started 2 games last year. It's like 100 yards against Syracuse and a touchdown, 2 touchdowns against UCLA. So, and even that West Virginia game when they were kind of bottling up Izzy, he's the one that kind of carried the offense for a while. So I think he's more than capable of being that lead guy. But I do wonder about the home run, the big 30, turning a 10-yard play into a 30-yard play. I don't know who they have right now.
Right. Yep. I feel like it was even before the season. I think Doran Dickerson actually said he predicted Pitt might have the leading rusher in the ACC, but he thought it would be Rodney Hammond and not Izzy. And it wasn't like crazy, like, laugh at Doran for a bad prediction. It was like, yeah, well, he might be right. I mean, because Izzy was kind of unproven at that point. Izzy had he'd scored 8 touchdowns over the previous 2 years. He wasn't exactly a proven commodity yet. We knew the potential was there. So it wasn't a crazy prediction, but I kind of I predicted Izzy would lead the ACC in rushing last year and Hammond would lead the ACC in rushing this year. So I'm already on the record for that. So we'll see if that comes to pass. But I don't know. It feels like they'll probably be run heavy again, though, right? I mean, do you see any way this team becomes a pass dominant group?
Pass dominant? No, but I mean, I think they can have a more effective passing game than what they had last season. I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Is Keaton Slovis had 10 touchdown passes. So just for the offense to be even a little more effective in the passing game, I mean, it's not a huge barrier for Phil Jurkovec to cross. So I mean, I still wonder about their playmakers in the passing game, but I still think they can probably do a little bit better. And I'm guessing Rodney Hammond's probably not going to have the same season as Izzy Abanikanda. Does that mean it levels out and it's still kind of the same 8-4 type team? Maybe. I'm not really sure.
Last one then here on the running backs before we move on. I just want to look at the numbers really quick. Pitt as a team last year had 2,379 rushing yards, which actually seems less than I would have guessed, but 2,379 rushing, it's 183 yards per game. This year's team tops that number or falls short of it, 2,379. So assuming 13 games. I mean, let's not get like crazy with, they're going to go to the college football playoffs and play 15 games or anything like that. 13 games.
I'm saying less. I do think the passing game is going to be a little bit better. And it just, some of those yards are just Izzy making crazy plays. I mean, I still think Rodney Hammett could be effective. I still think he's going to have a 1,000-yard season, but I don't know if they're going to kind of get to that point again this year.
Yeah, I mean, they got to whatever that was, 23-79. That's with a 300-yard game, and a 177-yard game. Izzy had almost 500 yards in 2 games alone. So that's that'll bump those stats up. You can still have a pretty effective running game and maybe not set a school record for most rushing yards in a single game. But look who showed up here, our friend Chris Gates. Chris Gates is in the chat, and so that seems like a good time to talk about Chris real quick. Panther-Lair live show, as always, it's sponsored by Chris Gates Fitness, and this week Chris has some big news to share. Chris's one-on-one online fitness training camp opens on August 7th, and it's your opportunity to get your own customized, personalized training and nutrition program to reach your health and fitness goals. You'll work with Chris to create a program tailored to you, and Chris will be there every step of the way to guide and support you through the process. When you join Chris's training camp, you'll be challenged to not only make progress, but also build the habits that help you maintain that progress long term. Just like how Pitt shows up to training camp on the South Side to start getting in shape and build their game plan for the season, you'll work with Chris to map out a strategy that helps you make progress during a time of year when people tend to see their health and fitness go in the wrong direction. Football season, tailgating, road trips, the holidays, and more make fall a really challenging time to take steps forward. But by signing up for Chris's training camp, you'll commit to enjoying all of those aspects of fall in a way that supports your goals. In fact, a bunch of Panther-Lair listeners signed up for Chris's coaching program last fall and saw amazing results. People who signed up lost a combined 120 pounds on the scale and 34 inches off their waistline. But it's not all about losing weight. These folks jumped into their own custom strength training programs and added quite literally hundreds of pounds to their pressing, squatting, rowing, and other lifts. In fact, a handful of people who signed up last year are still working with Chris today because they enjoy the process and they're continuing to find ways to make progress and set even higher goals for their health and fitness. This program is not only about losing body fat or building muscle. It's about combining all of these things into one program that pushes you in the right direction and helps you establish healthy, sustainable habits that serve you well for a lifetime. So don't forget that date, Chris Gates Fitness Training Camp. It opens on August 7th. Panther-Lair listeners will get a huge discount off the first month of coaching as well. Stay tuned to this podcast for more details and visit chrisgatesfitness.com to learn more. chrisgatesfitness.com to get the latest on what Chris is doing there. Jim, what's your max bench press?
Ooh.
Or when's the last time you bench pressed?
It's been a while. Maybe high school basketball. I don't know.
High school basketball? What'd you get up back in high school basketball? 225?
Maybe on a good day, but benching wasn't one of my strengths, so I need to call Chris.
You need to catch up with Chris for sure. So he's got that training camp starting August 7th. I think Pitt's training camp starts like August 2nd or something. They're jumping right into it. They've got, what do they have, 5 games in September this year? Is that right?
Yeah.
Like the schedule, like with the way the calendar works out. And
I think 4 or 3 of them are at home, and West Virginia, Virginia Tech. I mean, it's...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they're all in September. Four games against Power 5 opponents in September, and big opportunity there. But I mean, we'll talk about that a lot as time goes on. Let's. I want to get into some recruiting stuff, some things that you missed while you were gone, and one of those things. And TRR has a question about it just to get things started. He says it's looking more and more like in Duggar we trust as a quarterback for this class. Duggar is Julian Duggar, quarterback from Penn Hills. Filling people in on the backstory in case they missed it. We wrote about it early this week on Panther-Lair.com. Julian Duggar, quarterback from Penn Hills in the 2024 recruiting class. Pitt offered him last spring and then just kind of stopped recruiting him. Didn't seem all that sold on him as a quarterback. Even though he potentially could play other positions in college, they kind of backed off and didn't really talk to him much. This past Sunday, they held their passing camp, and he had a really good day. By all accounts, just really impressed the coaches, impressed Frank Signetti enough that he said, look, I like what I'm seeing. Come up to the office and let's talk football for a little bit, and liked what he saw there as well. So now Julian Duggar's a real option at quarterback here. There are other options still on the board, of course. But what's your reaction to this news of Julian Duggar, the renewed interest in Julian Duggar? Do you take this as being, oh, they must be missing out on all their other guys, or this is a legitimate option who's sort of emerged as someone the coaches will consider?
I might even take a third option. I think he might have just had a really good camp, and they just want to, in case he has a big senior year, hey, we're still here. It might not go any further than that. So, I mean, I don't want people to think it's like, oh, like they're talking to Julian Duggar, they're going to push for a commitment. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I think they're still working through everything, but I mean, it could be nothing more than, he looked really good at our camp. That might be it. I mean, he's had an interesting career because the Pitt coaches have known about him since he was a freshman. I mean, we've known about him since he was a freshman. He's a great athlete. I think Penn Hill's basketball is really good, and he's one of their best players. So I mean, he can do a little bit of everything. He's a good high school player. So I mean, I think that's an option. I think it's a possibility, but I mean, I still think Trevor Jackson's who they would like. I mean, I think that's kind of going in a different direction somewhat, but actually, I don't know what direction it's going in. I don't even know if Trevor Jackson knows what direction his recruitment's going in. I mean, I think that one's just a little bit off the board right now. So, I mean, there's going to be more names to emerge if Jackson goes elsewhere. Duggar will be one of them. So I don't know if he's the total answer, but he's, one of them.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to watch. I think they've got some time there. They don't need to push. But if they decide they like him enough, I think, I mean, there's a couple interesting things about him, aside from the fact that he's left-handed. I mean, he is a big athlete. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He's a really good athlete, like you said, really good basketball player. And he's the kind of guy, I mean, might take a year or two to develop as a quarterback. And if by some chance it doesn't work out there, he's a good enough athlete to play a bunch of other spots. And so I see it as such a low-risk move if that's what they end up doing, of taking him. It's just a matter of sort of, they just have to feel it out. And I think they've got time, that they don't need to rush on anything. But I do kind of agree. I think it was a situation where they weren't necessarily going into that camp on Sunday saying, oh, we got to find a new quarterback. It was like, oh, look at this guy. He's hitting every throw and looks really good reading defenses, admittedly in a 7-on-7 camp, but still, I think he really impressed them. Let's go. Chris is a super chatter, so we're going to get him in here. Says, guys, Florida State seems to have wandering eyes for the SEC. Do you see the ACC enacting a revenue sharing change for Clemson and Florida State to calm them down? I feel like we haven't talked about this in a little while. Did the ACC announce that they're moving toward that?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like right off the bat, but I mean, they're working towards that. And I think it was kind of somewhat in place already, because a couple weeks ago they said Pitt made the most money in 2021 because they won the championship. So I mean, I think it'll just be a little more now, but I don't know what's going to keep Florida State and Clemson happy, other than just probably reworking an entire TV deal, which is beyond what you and I can talk about probably.
Yeah. And like, even if you did uneven revenue sharing, it's not like you're going to make them whole compared to what the SEC is making. Like you're not going to uneven revenue share and all of a sudden they're getting $50 million a year. I mean, that's not, you're going to get them a couple extra million, not enough to actually make it even. But if it's a concession that somehow gets them to be happy, then sure, go for it. But we thank Chris for being a super chatter for sure. And jumping in. Anybody else wants to be a super chatter, make sure they get their comments and questions read. You can do that. Josh Newark says, can you break down freshman running backs that might get some playing time, what their skill set is? So 2 freshman running backs this year, right? TJ Harbison, who came in January, Montravius Lloyd, who arrived in June. I feel like Lloyd is more of a pass catcher, like all-purpose back. I mean, wasn't like a lot of his highlights, he was like catching screen passes or lining up in the slot, right?
Yeah, I think even when Pitt announced him on signing day, they had him at 5'10", 180, which is a little less than what we had him at Rivals. So he might be kind of more of that kind of gadget, I don't even know, swing back, whatever you want to call it. But then I would say Harbison's kind of more of a straight line, kind of physical runner. I mean, he had like 2,000 yards. His team won a state championship in Georgia last year. And that was actually a nice recruiting win for Pitt, I think, because it was, Pitt and Michigan State kind of jumped in on them late, and Pitt was able to land that commitment.
You see, I mean, I think probably one of those guys is going to get on the field. Probably not in a prominent role, barring an injury. Or do you think there's a potential there for one of them to jump, a Derek Davis or somebody?
I mean, I think the potential is there. If they feel like TJ Harbison can help them this year, then I don't see why they would hold him back. I mean, he was, of the two, he came to spring practice and he was there for all that. And they said positive things about him. It didn't seem like he was falling behind, and he had a couple nice runs in the spring game. So I think there's potential there. But I mean, I think in an ideal world, both of those guys are probably going to redshirt.
Swim Boyd has a question. It's actually kind of relevant to the running back conversation. It says, is it permanent now that redshirt freshmen get an extra game for the bowl games? So they passed this rule resolution in December, and it just kind of snuck in there of like, if you have a freshman or someone who's taking a red shirt this year, they can play in the bowl game or play in the postseason, and it won't count against their eligibility. It won't count against that. You can play 4 games and still take a red shirt. Kids can play in the postseason, and it wouldn't count against those 4 games. And this is relevant because Derek Davis I think he played 12 games as a freshman 2 years ago, but he played in 5 games last year. One of those 5 was the bowl game, LSU's bowl game against Purdue. And so I've actually been in many conversations. I'm actually not exaggerating. I've been in many conversations this week about this very topic with our friend EJ Borghetti, trying to resolve this question because Pitt lists Derek Davis as a junior, which is what he would be if that bowl game counted, and it would prevent him from taking a red shirt. But if that bowl game doesn't count, he only played 4 games in the regular season, plus that bowl game, he would be actually a redshirt sophomore this year. So we've had extending conversations about that, really putting the team to work over the summer. I don't know if that rule was permanent. Do you remember hearing anything about that?
I think it is going forward. So, I mean, it's just you could still play your 4 out of 12 regular season games. And I guess I think they probably did it because so many players are transferring before the bowl game,
right?
Or, opting out of bowl games. So these teams need players. So I think it was kind of a quick fix on that front.
So when it was first reported in mid-December, I'm reading the Athletics report on it from like December 16th. They called it a one-time blanket waiver that it applies only to the 2022-23 postseason. Now, I don't know if there's been subsequent updates to it because, like you said, I mean, it was largely in response to opt-outs and guys transferring prior to the bowl game, so you could actually have a whole roster. And so it was a response to that. And as such, it would make sense that you would allow this to continue beyond this season. I don't know if there's been anything in the last 6 months that they updated it or extended it. The crazy thing to me, though, is like so with Derek Davis, he played 5 games. He played 4 regular season games and 1 postseason game. But realistically, somebody could be playing like 3 postseason games, right? If a team makes their conference championship game and then the 2 college football playoff games, starting next year, they could play in 5 games?
Yeah.
How many would you play if in a 12-team playoff? You played 3 games or 4? I can't picture the bracket.
The first 4 would get a bye, then. So it'd be
but realistically, the max would be 3 games. So
yeah.
So in theory, you could have a guy who plays 8 games in a year and still takes a red shirt. If you have this postseason waiver, right? You know what I mean? Like you could play your 4 regular season games, play your conference championship game, and then 3 playoff games, and still take a red shirt. I think that's probably extreme. I wonder if they might do it like a percentage of total games played. You know what I mean? Or
how much does this really affect people? I mean, because from a freshman standpoint, or even just any redshirt standpoint, for the most part, guys are either playing or they're not. So we're kind of talking about like Derek Davis type situations. I mean, like how many Pitt freshmen actually did burn their red shirt last year and actually played more than 4 games?
Not many. I have to look this up.
But that's kind of
it's only a handful of guys. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. So I mean, it's helpful, but I mean, I don't know how broad it is because I don't know how many cases this really affects.
Wait, I don't think Pitt had a single guy burn his red shirt from last year's class. They don't have a single true sophomore on the roster. Looking at the scholarship board, there isn't a single one. They have a bunch of redshirt freshmen. They have 10 redshirt freshmen, but no, and one of those is Jackson Brown who transferred in. So unless I'm missing something, I mean, did they not have any freshmen who played more than 4 games?
I don't think they did.
I mean, I'm looking. Yeah, I mean, even as I look through the redshirt freshman guys, I mean, Ryan Baer, Sam Okunlola played a few games. Sean Fitzsimmons played some. Gandy played some, but I guess not more than 4. I'm just saying the potential exists that a guy could possibly play 8 games and still redshirt. That seems a bit extreme to me. But if you're going to have opt-outs and you're going to have transfers, I mean, you look at what Pitt's roster situation was. You look at, if you're going to have that many guys out, you need to be able to fill in. And so I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what the solution is there. And you're right. It's ultimately there aren't going to be that many guys who play 8 games and Redshirt. And if a guy is that good to play 8 games in Redshirt, it doesn't matter if he redshirts or not. He's going to go to the NFL as a redshirt sophomore instead of a junior. I mean, it's not, I think it's probably a moot point, but it'd be interesting to see. And if anyone knows if they extended it, let us know. Here's a question for you. Voodoo IPA, who seems like probably a biased party, says, what was Jim's favorite, best vacation beer? I got to try the Veil and the Answer in Richmond.
Actually, in South New Jersey, there's been a lot of breweries popping up. I've been loyal to Cape May Brewery. They have a couple good ones. They have a Crushing It beer. It's like an orange crush, like the drink, but it's like an IPA. So it's a good summer beer.
Crushing It. Is it like a session IPA that you can like crush a lot of them, or is it real heavy?
It's kind of more on the heavy side, but yeah, it's a good one.
So, but I mean, the real question, Jim, is have you tried the orange creamsicle Vizzy? No, you haven't tried the orange creamsicle flavor of Vizzy hard seltzer. You're missing out. It tastes like an orange creamsicle. I don't know why you would ever want to drink something like that, but it tastes like an orange creamsicle. And if you're stuck drinking gluten-free stuff, orange creamsicle Vizzy is not the worst option. All right, let's scroll on here. Any other comments on beers or anything from your vacation? Anything else to share before we move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Chris says, hopefully Pitt is keeping an eye out for quality running backs in the transfer portal. There's still a space or two on the roster. Do they need a running back out of the portal?
No, I think they could probably find a position or two, most notably wide receiver, but I don't think they need a 7th scholarship running back on the roster.
If you were going to list all of the positions, how many positions would you go through before you got to running back? If you're going to list like the positions that need to transfer the most,
like
right
for this upcoming
game?
game?
Yeah, at this point right here. Yeah. Wide receiver, like you said, is one.
Yeah, wide receiver. I mean, I think you would always take an offensive lineman if you thought he could help, or I mean, there aren't like a lot of glaring positions on the roster where I think to the point where they need to add someone in the next month before the season starts. Like I kind of think they know what they have. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you could find an extra experienced linebacker that could come in and help, then sure. Yeah. But I think most of their positions are set. But they could really stand to add a receiver, and I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest priority, and it sort of feels like that window is closed. I mean, they could pull a surprise, but the further you get, the shorter the amount of time there is for that new player to come in and learn the playbook, and that can it starts to render it. It starts to remove the effectiveness or usefulness of bringing that transfer in. Josh Newark says, any chance Gavin Bartholomew plays more of an H-back role this year? He compares him to Score and Doran, and says takes more snaps in the backfield to create those mismatches. I wouldn't compare him to Score and Doran Dickerson. I would compare him to Gavin Bartholomew 2021. We're talking about, like, does he get back to a role similar to what he had? And I think he should. I don't know who you would then use as your like primary inline tight end if you start moving Bartholomew into that kind of role where he's averaging 1 point yard, yards per route run or whatever it is. I mean, but he seemed like he was much more effective in that role in 21 than the role that he tried to fill in 22. And I think we have talked about this before, but I guess that would be the big question is, right? So if you're going to move him back to an H-back role, if you're going to move him back into the backfield and play more fullback or wingback or whatever it is, who's the inline tight end? Is it Carter Johnson? Is it Jake Brenda? I mean, maybe they need to transfer tight end to come in and play that spot.
Yeah, maybe that's position. I mean, I think Gavin Bartholomew can play more of the traditional tight end. I don't know if he was ready to do it full time to be that number one guy last year, but I also think he can do a little bit everything. You can line him up, put him in motion, line him up in the slot, line him up at fullback. I think he's a guy you can move around. I think, his best asset is what they showcased in 2021. He's a big kid, and if you can get him the ball and get him going downfield, he's tough to tackle. He's really good athlete. So, I mean, they just need to get him the ball. And it's not so much they weren't looking for him last year, or it's just he was kind of miscast, but I think they can be a little more creative this season.
This is an interesting one here. Josh Newark says Phil Jurkovec runs for 500 yards himself. Jim, over under 350 rushing yards for Phil Jurkovec this season.
I'm probably taking the under. I mean, what was even with Boston College? I think he had one good rushing year and it was like 200 some yards. But that,
I was just looking at that. It was 2 years ago. He rushed for 322 yards in 6 games, which might have been part of the reason that he only played 6 games. It's because he had 50 rushing attempts for 322 yards.
but I mean, the thing with Phil is he was like a prolific runner for Pine Richland. Like he was a dual threat quarterback. I think he had 1,000 rushing yards as a senior. So I mean, there is ability there. But I mean, I think in a perfect world, he's not going to be rushing for 500 yards, and you probably don't want him to either.
Right. You need him to keep the play alive and make throws downfield. I mean, that's where, and maybe occasionally scramble for a first down. But I think for the most part, you just want him keeping the play alive, getting out of the pocket, and making throws downfield. Chris says Pitt has been heavy into quarterback transfers the past few years. I wonder if the coaching staff is more interested in developed transfers rather than investing a lot of resources into scouting young quarterbacks. I think there's a balance there, right? I mean, I think, you do need to take high school guys and try and develop them over the course of years. But, a Christian Bayer has been in college for 2 years. He's been in a strength program. He's learned college offenses for 2 years. Phil Jurkovec has been in a college offense and college strength program and just college in general for 5 years now. I mean, I think there is a balance. I guess I would put a question of this. Over every 4-year cycle, how many high school quarterbacks do you think they should take in any given 4-year period?
I mean, I've always been under the belief that you should take a high school quarterback every year just to do it. But like, I've also relented in that a little bit because of guys like Bayer. I think you're probably at a point now where you almost need to rebuild your quarterback room from year to year because you're going to have a transfer, at least one or two. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. We've talked about quarterbacks before where only one guy can take the snap. So everyone's always looking for that next spot. So, this year, I mean, they have 3 new quarterbacks. Next year, they might have, 2 or 3 again. I mean, I think that's just kind of how it is these days.
Yeah, I agree. It's a balance. And even if, I mean, I think you're right. Like there is value in just taking a guy every year with kind of the assumption that 2 years, you only keep 2 of them through, at least 3 years. You only get at least 3 years out of 2 out of the 4. I mean, it's just the guys are going to come and go, and you just, go get the hired gun every couple of years. Speaking of guns, better southpaw quarterback, Matt Lytle, Tyler Palko, or Rod Rutherford?
I think Tyler Palko was better than Rod Rutherford. I think Rod Rutherford just had Larry Fitzgerald. I could be wrong in that assessment, but that's kind of where I lie on things.
I think Rod had a bigger arm than Tyler, so he could throw it further for Larry Fitzgerald to catch it. I don't know, like some of those plays downfield, those contested catches, Rod probably gives Larry a better chance of making the play than Tyler does, I think. But I don't know. I wonder if Josh has an opinion on that. But I'll say Rod, you say Tyler, and we'll just split the difference. Nobody wants to pick Matt Lytle, though?
Apparently not.
No, that's rough. Wolf HD says, why do you think Pitt keeps falling down the ACC championship odds? I think they're 7th or 8th now. I haven't really followed any movement in the championship odds. I'm not really sure what is changing there. I think if there's a biggest question mark about Pitt, it's Phil Jurkovec. I mean, he wasn't good the last 2 years. He was hurt a lot, but he wasn't good when he was healthy, when he was out there playing. He wasn't good. He hasn't really been good since 2020. And they tried the thing last year where they tried to get a guy who hasn't been good for 2 years and tried to make him good. And that didn't exactly work out. So, I mean, I have to think that's where the biggest question marks are coming from, in addition to, replacing 6 starters on defense. But I haven't seen the ACC championship odds lately. I don't know if you have, but if they're falling, as Wolf HD suggests, why do you think that is?
I mean, yeah, the question about this team is all about Jurkovec, and we've known that since he committed here. But I haven't checked the odds, but I think Pro Football Focus, they did their preseason top 25 and preseason ACC rankings, and I think Pitt cracked the top 25, and they were 3rd in the ACC. So I guess it's all depends on who you want to listen to at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, super chat again. I think it's the same Chris, says Tom Savage, Nate Peterman, Keaton Slovis, Phil Jurkovec were all transfer quarterbacks who became starters. I don't know why there's no love for Max Brown in there. Does Pitt favor experienced transfers over recruiting young quarterbacks? Well, I mean, those are different coaching staffs for one thing. I mean, the Savage was the Paul Chris staff. I think these have been sort of born of necessity. You know what I mean? Like, they went and got Nate Peterman because he was close with Jim Chaney and they needed another quarterback. I mean, they didn't have anybody. They had Voitik. You know, I don't know if there was another scholarship quarterback returning. They recruited Ben DiNucci in that class, and they had to go get someone just to have more quarterbacks on the roster, in addition to have somebody that could compete with Chad Voitik. They went and got Slovis because I think they wanted a 1-year fill-in on a team that seemed to have most of the pieces it needed to repeat as ACC champions, you know, and they went and got Jurkovec, I think, for similar reasons. And plus, they didn't feel great about any of the young quarterbacks they had, which was one. They had one young quarterback, and so they needed somebody to come in. I don't know if it's a matter of preference. I think it's a matter of situation. It's a way the scenario worked out. I don't know. I don't know. Do you have any answer to his question?
I mean, I think in a perfect world, if Pitt could get the top high school quarterback they won each year, they would prefer that. It's just some years they've lost some recruiting battles, and every situation's a little bit different. So I think that's why the transfers came in. But I still think if they could get their number one quarterback on their board every year, that would be their preference.
Let's see. TRR says, I predict 3 true freshmen play and burn their red shirt in 2023. 2 wide receivers and a linebacker. I don't entirely disagree with that. I think at least 1 wide receiver will burn his red shirt. And probably 2. I mean, I could be talked into it with Kenny Johnson and you know, Lamar Seymour, one of those guys. 1 linebacker. Yeah, I would think probably at least 1 linebacker gets out of this season playing more than 4 games or more than 5 games. What you agree with TRR's prediction there?
Yeah, I can buy both because I think they're going to need some wide receiver depth. And just coming out of spring ball, they really seem to like Braylon Lovelace. And as we know, Jordan Bass might have been their top recruit. So yeah, there's definitely a chance for a linebacker to play. So yeah, like last year, I kind of can't believe neither one of us kind of realized that none of the freshmen actually burned the red shirt, but I do think that's probably going to happen this year. Yeah,
it was a team with a lot of depth last year. Maybe not a lot of quality freshmen. I don't know. But I mean, like, you know, some of their best freshmen last year were, you know, I would say Sean Fitzsimmons, Sam Okunlola, Ryan Baer.
Well, there's also a 12-man recruiting class.
Right. So it's a tiny
Sam Vanderhaar burned his red shirt.
Vanderhaar burned his red shirt, but he's not. Okay. So yeah, they do not have a true sophomore on the roster, but that's because he left. You're right. So Sam Vanderhaar, did. Okay, that's a good point. But I mean, like, you look at the best freshmen in the class, you know, whether it's Fitzsimmons, Okunlola, Bear, they had a lot of depth at those positions. They didn't need a freshman to step in there, even though those guys were probably good enough to play and contribute. I mean, they had, Haba Baldonado and Deslin Alexandra and, Kalijah Cansey and, some really good offensive tackles. I mean, they didn't really need those guys. Whereas this year, I think they'll probably find more openings to get some of those freshmen in. And we talked about tight ends who could be that main inline tight end. And Wolf HD points out, and a few people pointed out, Malcolm Epps. Wolf HD calls him Marcus Epps, so I'll hide his comment there. Brock Madonic got the right name, Malcolm Epps. So maybe Epps could play as the inline guy and give Bartholomew a chance to play H-back. I don't know. I don't have any expectations whatsoever for Malcolm Epps. I forgot that he was even on the team. So do you have any idea what to expect out of him?
I mean, he's made some plays before. I think he was a wide receiver recruit out of high school. So, I mean, there's some athleticism there, but I don't know what to expect. I think he was brought in just mainly for experience and to probably just get a 5th tight end on the roster.
Yeah, I think so too. General So's Chicken says, I think Phil is going to be a lot like Chad Voitik, but will have better talent around him and hopefully a better record. A few things, I guess, to break down there. I don't know about better talent around him. Chad Voitik in 2013 had James Conner and Tyler Boyd. I don't think this team has anything, even though it was freshman year James Conner, I don't think this team has anything equivalent of that. He had Devin Street too. So that was a pretty good, that was in 13. I guess when Voitik was a soft, actually, and then in 14, Voitik had Tyler Boyd, an even better Tyler Boyd, and an even better James Conner. So I think he has the talent advantage as far as the players around him. Phil, the difference between Phil and Voitik is Phil is big. I mean, Phil is far more of a Roethlisberger than Voitik, who is a smaller guy. I mean, I think he was shorter than me. And Phil is like 240 pounds. He's like 6'3" or 6'4", or whatever. I mean, he's a big guy. He's going to shed tackles. I don't know how many guys he's going to outrun. Whereas Voitik, I think, could probably make a few moves and outrun guys. Phil Jurkovec is going to be the kind of guy that gets hit and he's able to shed that tackle and keep the play alive. So I don't know if I see, and I think he's got a bigger arm too. He might not have great accuracy, but I think he can throw the ball a lot farther than Chad Voitik can. So I don't see many comparisons there. I don't know if anything stands out to you.
No, I mean, they're two different players, so I don't see a ton of similarities at all, really.
Yeah. Let's see. The Rod Rutherford Tyler Palco conversation. TRR says Rod and Tyler had something in common. Mush Pitt offensive lines that couldn't pass block for them. Yeah, that was a bit of a problem. O-lines were not great over the course of those years, but I think Rod did a little bit more. But yeah, Tyler 2005 and 2006 were pretty ugly in the trenches at Pitt. I think the years of Walt Harris recruiting caught up to Pitt at that point. And when you bring in a coach like Dave Wanstead, who is just so over the top about his defensive line and insistent upon the offensive line and winning the line of scrimmage and all that stuff. I mean, it was a bad combination because those teams weren't very good. And it took until 2007. And when you look at what really kind of keyed the turnaround, it was that they had a great defensive line and their offensive line started building up and getting better. So yeah, Rod and Tyler did struggle a little bit with that. So I don't know if that, that's probably
I'm trying to think of like the linemen from those years, like some of the Rob Petiti.
Yeah, I mean Petiti's probably one of the better ones.
Charles Spencer. I mean, he was actually
Spencer. He was like 05, 06. He moved from defensive line to guard and then guard to tackle. Jeff Oda came in. He might have been in 07.
He was a Wani guy.
Yeah, he was a Wanstead guy. Trying to think of the other guys they kind of inherited. I mean, like Chris Vangus and Joe Villani. These were like Wanstead guys who might have been recruited by Harris and kind of through the transition. It wasn't great. I mean, it was a pretty rough scene in the defensive lines. Charles Sellette and Thomas Smith, and it wasn't a good group. And they if Dave Wanstead did anything, he rebuilt Pitt in the trenches there. Let's see. A couple more comments and questions here. It's arguing with us. Chris says, I think Pitt has Jurkovec and a lot of question marks behind him. Grabbing a transfer quarterback might make sense. If he meets for this year, I don't think there's a lot. I mean, they did. It's Christian Veilleux. So they got a transfer quarterback to back him up. I mean, we talk about what we think about Jurkovec a lot. If that point comes, and look, Jurkovec has missed time every one of the last 3 seasons due to injuries. So, I mean, history says he might miss some time this year. What do are you at least interested to see what Veilleux can do? I mean, what's your expectation with him?
I mean, I'm definitely interested, and there's not a lot to go off of, but he does have one college start, and he's 1-0, and he threw 3 touchdown passes against Rutgers. I mean, that's something. So, I mean, there's some intrigue there, and I guess Nate Yarnell has 1 college start and a win and a touchdown pass against Western Michigan. So, I mean, we don't know what they can do when the bright lights if they had to step in and play against Florida State, but I'd be interested.
Who Jurkovec goes down in the Cincinnati game or West Virginia. Is Veilleux just an automatic? I mean, I think we both probably assume the coaches are with Veilleux, but is there a part of you that thinks Yarnell is a better option?
Not really. I mean, I think Veilleux is probably the better option, but I mean, Narduzzi was always quick in spring ball to compliment. Like Nate Yarnell's doing a really good job leading because he was the only returning quarterback, so he kind of had to be. So I mean, I think they trust them, both of them. I mean, Yarnell started a game for him, so they have to trust him a little bit.
All right, last question, Wolf HD. Since we should actually talk recruiting just for a second here, is Nick Marsh a lost cause for Pitt? 4-star wide receiver from Michigan took his official visit to Pitt early in the month. Seems like it's probably Pitt or Michigan State or Penn State. I forget who else he announced. Oregon and Kansas, I think, were his top 5. And he's committing soon, right? What's
July
his
7th, maybe? There's
March?
going to be
Yeah, the 7th. Yeah, there's a bunch over the next week and a half.
Lost cause. I mean, I don't. There was hope that they could land him. I think they did well in the official visit, but I think kind of the overarching thought is that Penn State was always kind of leading. I still think they are leading it, but Michigan State made a run this weekend, so it'll be interesting. So I think Pitt did everything they could to put their best foot forward, but I think it was an uphill battle trying to land a Michigan kid over some Big Ten schools.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But we'll find out in a week, I guess. And it is like over the next like 10 days or 8 days, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 or 9 guys announcing their commitments. So actually that counted Coy Beasley, who committed to Purdue last night. Maurice Schmorenzer, German offensive lineman, and Dominic Kirk's 4-star defensive end. They're both committing tomorrow night, so we'll keep an eye on that. And maybe next week, let's actually talk some recruiting. What do you think? You want to do that?
Yeah. We'll wrap up all of June
actually, yeah, that'll be perfect. Yeah, even though today is almost the last day of June, we could have done it today. We had other stuff to talk about. We had to talk about the KSM connection to random North Carolina colleges and Pitt transfer running backs. I'm still not to the bottom of that. But if you never hear from me again, you know that probably I tapped into something that I shouldn't have tapped into. But either way, Jim, we're glad you're back from vacation. It was nice to chat with you again. Glad you made it back from New Jersey to smoky Johnstown, kicking it like the 1930s. It's always fun. And thanks everybody who joined in tonight. It's been a lot of fun on the chat and everybody who had their comments and questions. So stay tuned at Panther-Lair.com for all the Pitt coverage, and right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then we appreciate it. So we'll have our morning Pitt mailbag tomorrow morning. And then we'll be back next Wednesday night for the live Panther-Lair show. So Jim, good night. Everyone out there, good night. We'll talk to you tomorrow.